Now, how many of you are actually spooking a lot of deer when you access your stands? That's a common problem on a lot of private lands and small private land parcels, let alone public land. You just can't afford to spook deer on your entrance. At least, you know, you can never say never. You can never plan 100% spook free, but you're putting the odds in your favor if you follow these 5 tips and you live by these and you use these going into the hunting season and throughout your hunt throughout the year. Very critical. Number 1, defined deer movement. Now, it seems rather obvious. Deer are bedding here, they're feeding here. And if you know that, then you can get in and out of the land without spooking deer. And that extends to public land. If you know they're feeding on this greenbrier, on this flat, on the top of a knoll, and then they're bedding over on this bench and down low in this area, in a cooler area, or they're bedding in this clear cut, and they're feeding in this clear cut, and they're traveling between on this bench system during the rut, then you could really define that pattern just recognizing it. And that's what I look for on public land. I'm trying to find that pattern and how I can exploit that to shoot a mature buck within that pattern. Same on private land. Again, seems obvious. They feed here, they bed there, and you hunt in between. But it's not that obvious, because there's a lot of things using mock scrapes, water holes, cut travel corridors, food plot entrance exit, bedding area entrance exit, that you can create to define that if the deer are bedding here, they enter exit here. If the deer are feeding here, they enter exit here. And then you put those pieces together. That's why I typically do not recommend a mock scrape or a water hole on a food source, except for small food plots, maybe in a corner somewhere, because you're already adding attraction to an attraction. You already have deer that are going there, so you're just adding more. And it diminishes that value of placing a mock scrape in between bedding, a highly used mock scrape that's used all year long in between bedding and food sources, let alone a water hole too. And so I like to strengthen the movement with those. If you're just putting them in bedding areas or food sources, you're not necessarily strengthening the movement, you're just strengthening that location. And then the deer can come in from any angle. So trying to define, about 15 years ago, I coined the phrase deer line of movement or whitetail line of movement, a line of movement. So I've been using that ever since. I put it in my book in 2012. But a line of movement is just that. It's from bedding to feeding, through mock scrapes, through water holes, through travel corridors, with entrance and exit locations. You can greatly define how the deer move, even making a chainsaw cut travel corridor, whether it's switchgrass cut travel corridor, mowing through switchgrass, mowing through tag alders. There's so many ways to connect the dots. That's called a deer line of movement. And the more you define how deer move on the land, the more you can define how you hunt. So that definition of deer movement is more important than anything. I see a lot of people, this is our access, we just throw the stands out, we walk through food plots, we walk near bedding areas, and you have to be able to get in and out. And if you define that movement, now you have morning stands back by bedding, you have evening stands by food, you have side stands that are great for all day cruising, maybe for evening or morning stands. So you can define not only how the deer move, but you can define how you hunt. And if you have all those access locations and you know the deer moving from point A to point B, now you can actually get in and out without spooking deer. And that is so critical on any land you hunt, whether it's public or private. Now, in order to access a stand location without spooking deer, maybe I should have started with this. The stand location or blind location has to be hidden. If the stand location or blind location is not hidden from the deer that you're trying to enter and exit without spooking, then how can you enter and exit without spooking those deer? The blind has to be hidden. The stand has to be hidden. Your access to that blind or stand has to be hidden. And again, the more defined that movement is, the more easy it is that you can locate a stand or blind off to the side in a hidden area and not spook deer. You can see the redneck ghillie blind behind me, or maybe you can't, but it's only about 5 feet behind me and it's extremely hidden. We have major food right here, a food plot. That food plot edge is only 30 to 35 yards away. The deer come from over here, they access here, sometimes they come in front of us. We have to blow our scent back behind us. We have a ridge system over here that we can access all the way around to the west, travel south, get on the backside of the ridge where there's a low probability of deer in that direction, and then enter behind the ridge. So we can get into this stand very non-invasively. We're using another factor to get in here, but bottom line is this is extremely hidden. You have a hard time even seeing it driving by with the truck, and we know it's here 20 feet away, let alone deer that are accustomed to this. They'd known it's been here for a few years. They walk right next to it. This doesn't bother them anyway because it's extremely hidden. It just blends in with the brush. I don't know what they think it is now, maybe a rock, but I love these redneck ghillie blinds because they can stay extremely hidden. We actually have 4 of them on this land, and they're all extremely hidden. We have Egyptian wheat, honeysuckle bushes, brush, garbage all around them, and so they just blend right in. The deer have no clue that they're even there. So how can you access and not spook deer if your blind is not hidden? And that goes directly, this is aimed directly at those big blinds and shooting houses that are out in the middle of the food plot. Yes, on some of the large Fantasyland state properties, you can get away with that because there's hardly any hunting pressure. You can spook a few deer in and out. It's never better that you're spooking deer. I mean, you can imagine. I mean, if you ask yourself, is it ever better to spook deer on the way in and out of your stand? And the answer would be a resounding no, no matter what state you're hunting in. And you have to have hidden access. You have to be able to get in and out of that blind without spooking deer. Now we're entering this blind, like I said, we're coming in from behind this ridge system, and we're getting in through a non-deer area because we've defined the deer movement over here. So we're using the lay of the land to get in here. We're actually staying in a hidden valley here. We can walk right in from the side of the road, walk through the valley. We're not getting into any deer that are bedded out there. We have improved no bedding areas this way. That allows us to slip around here, and we use this stand with a northerly wind, and we use the stand right over here with southerly winds. We're watching the same movement in between, and it's hidden, whether we go all the way around and get into this stand from the side, or we just go straight up the valley and access that. My wife Diane, this is actually, I think it's the pine tree. She actually missed the double drop tine buck out of here last year that was about 155 inches. We show a lot. We show trail cam footage. He was a beast. And then she had an opportunity on a buck the year before in that location, a big one. It's her favorite stand. We have some sorrowful memories of missing bucks out of that, but she's had a lot of happy memories of sitting here and watching deer walk right by, and they have no clue because it's in a big white pine, and she can get into it from the cover side and not have to even expose herself right out here in this shot. So lay of the land, whether you're accessing behind berms, you're accessing through valleys, you're accessing a low spot. I was just in 3 parcels in Michigan, southern Michigan last weekend, and all of them had a slight little roll. And it might even be an elevation change of 2 feet, but there's always a way that you could use the lay of the land, a ditch system, a river bottom to get in and out, even in flatland country. There's always a way to get in and out using that terrain and those terrain features, even if you have to walk an extra 10 minutes on flat ground to go all the way around and come in a quote harder way to get into that hidden stand location by using lay of the land. If you don't have that lay of the land where there's ridges, there's a 4th way to get in and out, and that's using screening options. You've seen I've used Egyptian wheat. We use switchgrass from our permanent solution. That's a perennial that you can plant, and switchgrass can stay good for 10 years or more without having to touch it if you plant it right. And Egyptian wheat is a single year annual blend that I've used extensively. Clients have used for going back 10 to 12 years. Also, and I have videos, if you just look up Egyptian wheat screening on YouTube, you'll find my other videos for Egyptian wheat. Also, there's some great screening blends. John Comp from northwoodswhitetails.com, he has some of the best screening blends out there, and that's what one of the things he specializes in. Along with his brassica blend, we have the fall blends he uses, but his screening blends are top notch because they don't have a food value in there. A lot of people say, well, I'll use this corn strip, or I'll access behind the corn. I'll access behind the sunflower patch, or whatever it might be. But if there's food in there, some of the sweet sorghums, if it's a food component, it should never, ever be used as a screening blend. Imagine using 10 strips of corn and you're trying to access behind there. Well, what happens in November and December when those deer are hammering that corn? Now you just invited deer to your access. And that can go for some of the sorghums that are in there, sunflowers, various types of food or forage that's in that screening blend. You never want food in your screening blend that is not a good screening blend. In fact, it works the opposite. Berms. I've had clients that have bermed 220 yards at one time. I've had clients that have built berms with a tunnel through the side so they could get through on an open ag field setting a quarter mile. And so berms are expensive. You might have access to some dirt working implements out there, heavy equipment, or have a friend that has heavy equipment, whatever it might be. But it is a viable option to locate. I have one client that's a quarter mile, where a road goes around the 40-acre food plot or field with food plots, pine plantings, lots of plantings in. And he actually has a back door to a blind on the outside of the berm that he can actually park from alongside the roads in northern Wisconsin. They've shot some monsters out of there in that location because they simply just walk to the back door, open the blind, they're in the middle of the berm, and then look out the food plot. They can't see unless they travel 12 feet up the berm and look over or look out the window of the blind. So berms are a great option that you can actually build. Expensive though. Egyptian wheat, fairly inexpensive, especially I plant it at 15 to 20 pounds per acre. I like to plant more late June, July, so you're focused on 8 to 10 feet without a heavy weighted seed head. Really bunches in there quick and doesn't fall over. I've learned that by experience over and over again. Pretty cheap option because it's usually in small locations. And then switchgrass is really long-term the cheapest option because you can have switchgrass that'll be 6 to 8 feet tall, and in just 2 years if you plant it right, and offer some great screening. You make it as wide as you need. And so screening options are awesome. And guess what? When you use those screening options, especially in the case of switchgrass, let's say you're walking behind a 40-foot bank or 40-foot wide strip of switchgrass that's 6, 7 feet tall. You do not project not only your sight, deer can't see you behind there, but they have a lot harder time smelling you with a stray wind that goes into that switchgrass and breaks apart your scent molecules with all those stems per acre. And then certainly being able to hear you is definitely dampened when you're walking behind that bank of grass. So projecting your noise, your sight, your sound, your scent out into the property, there's some great screening options that you can use to make sure that you get on and off your property without spooking deer. And that brings us to the fifth point. The fifth point is very important because whether you're accessing behind switchgrass, you're using defined movements to come in from the side, you have hidden access, you have to have quiet tree stands. So quiet tree stands, quiet access, quiet blinds getting in and out, you have to be quiet. And that's something I think that a lot of people, obviously, they go way overboard on scent control. I think, unfortunately, people don't hide their sight enough. I mean, obviously, if we came in with an ATV down this valley system out here, we'd spook every deer within a quarter mile. On this particular property, we have high pressure and it's open, and the deer run a quarter mile when they spook and they're gone. So, you know, some people think about that, ATV use. Sight, a lot of times people aren't thinking, you know, if the deer see you, it is a major concern. If they see you getting in and out of your stand in the evening or at dark or in the morning, major blunder if you could have avoided that. But being quiet, whether it's an ATV, whether it's noisy gear getting in and out of your stand. I was so happy because I've enjoyed the Sitka Fanatic gear for several years now. It's awesome. Shot a lot of deer with them, and I thought it was a great product, but they made it 50% quieter this year with the new Fanatic series. So kind of cool. I'm anxious to try something that was already really quiet anyways, but quiet and being quiet is one of the most important things in the woods. You go into a noisy stand, people say, oh, there's all kinds of noises in the woods, branches, wind blowing, deer moving around, critters, but not metallic noises, not unnatural noises. So when you get into a stand that creaks and it has that metal tang, sometimes you're spooking deer 200 yards away, and you might find, oh, the doe and fawn came in right away, or those young bucks. But folks, this channel is about really upping your game and making sure that you have an honest chance at the oldest bucks in the neighborhood every single season. If you want just average information, there's a lot of that out there. This is really advanced. Making sure, I want you guys to, if you work at it and you work on the property like I work with my clients, I want to make sure that you harvest an unfair amount of mature bucks over a 10-year period. I believe, and I've seen it and I've experienced it firsthand, that you should be able to shoot 80% of your target bucks in a given neighborhood with a lot of hunting pressure over a 10-year period. You just have to follow these principles. You have to get in and out of your land without spooking deer. Those are 5 ways to do it. I hope you try it this year. I hope you've already planned for it, because boy, when you can get in and out of your stands without spooking deer, and you develop those core areas, you have good food, you have good fall winter cover, you have good fall food, then amazing things happen that, guess what? The majority of the hunters never get to experience out there because they don't put it all together. And I want you to put it together, enjoy it this year, and leave those comments down below for how you're enjoying this system and the other systems we talked about. And I can't wait to hear it. I try to respond to every comment. I think I do 80–90% of the time. And I hope you guys have a great season. It is coming up right now, coming in hot. I know Dylan, he's running the camera. They're running to North Dakota this weekend for the opener. And it actually opens tomorrow. So I was lucky to have him filming right now at this point. And good luck to Dylan and all those that are going out right now.